This is the conservative czar, March 14th, 2022. This is going to be about the Ukraine part two, elaborating on the first one, the video. Then the first video, part one, concentrated itself on the coup of 2013-2014. That coup which kicked out the freely elected, corrupt but freely elected president of the Ukraine. It was a Russian ethnic. The Ukrainians revolted, had a coup supported by the United States, and kicked out the duly elected president of the Ukraine. And that's where this whole thing comes from. All of this stuff we're talking about comes from that coup. But I want to step back a little bit and talk about what went on when this all started, 1991. And this is when basically Boris Yeltsin, with the help of Gorbachev, Boris Yeltsin ended the Soviet Union. And he allowed the countries, the various Soviets, the countries, to evolve themselves into independence, and it went very quickly. But we want to concentrate on what happened in the Ukraine, because the Ukraine is the most unique of the members of the Soviet Union that were freed. And they're unique because of their total ties to Russia. And so something interesting happened very early. The Russians allowed for a plebiscite in Ukraine to decide whether or not they're going to become independent or stay with Russia. The vote, now this is what, remember, the backdrop to a lot of this is that half of Ukraine is of Ukrainian ethnic stock, and half is Russian ethnic. Now, how the Russians got there, there's been a migration into Ukraine from Russia for over 200 years. 200 years, Russia held Ukraine, and there was this migration to the point where half the population is Russian ethnic. So we have a plebiscite. What's very interesting about this is that when the vote came out, the overwhelming number of Ukrainian ethnics voted for it, but so did the Russians. Overwhelmingly voted for independence. This is a blow to Russia, but that's what happened in the plebiscite. And what I'm bringing it up is they're basically this time the Ukrainian ethnics and the Russian ethnics on the same side. There's a period of turmoil in Ukraine, political turmoil between the oligarchs, the old communist regime, and others that were trying to gain foothold. So the truth of the matter is from 1991, 92, there isn't a free election that's recognized by everybody to be free until 2004. So, but the point I'm trying to stepping back a little bit, the Russians allowed the Ukrainians to become independent. They were a part of the Soviet Union, and they allowed Ukraine to pursue independence. Now, one of the things that happened here was that Russia had staged a whole bunch of nuclear missiles in Ukraine. So you'll hear this over this refrain by the idiots that we forced them, or Russia stole the nuclear weapons from Ukraine. That's not the case. Nobody in the world wanted the Ukrainians to have those nuclear weapons. And the Russians said, no, we're going to take all the nuclear weapons away. And that was part of that deal. That was part of that deal. So that is what happened. By 2004, we have our first elections, and then we have the coup of 2013, 2014 that drives out the freely elected Russian, and this is when everything hits the fan. Russia finally gives up on this idea that they could have, that Ukraine is going to act neutrally between the Ukrainian ethnics and the Russian ethnics. They overthrow the government, the Ukrainian ethnics take over, Russia then takes the Crimea. Understand, nobody complained about the Crimea, okay? Nobody complained about it because they knew that Russian interest in the Crimea, they have a port there that is their big military base on the military base, and the Crimea was never going to be allowed to go. In addition to that, the two provinces on the east had an insurrection right after the coup. And they said, no. We don't accept the coup. We are declaring ourselves independent. The Ukrainians, get this for a second. Russia frees the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians voted for a plebiscite. The Ukrainians will not allow any discussion of independence of these republics in the east of Ukraine that are basically Russian populated. You know, the hypocrisy is unbelievable all throughout this thing. So we're now faced with a situation. I want to step back a little bit and now talk about why some of the parts of why we are where we are. And what I want to talk about is what happened when the Soviet Union broke up. Ukraine gets their freedom. Who else got their freedom? Among others, all these countries got their freedom. Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Slovenia, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. All of them were given freedom from the Soviet Union to become independent states. What has happened to all of them except the Ukraine? All of them joined NATO. Ukraine, the closest part to the Russians in terms of history, in terms of military, has not joined NATO. Okay, but every other one did. Think of it from the part of the Russians. You give away all these countries, and what does the United States do? Brings them into a military organization to fight the Russians. What are the Russians supposed to do? They're being surrounded by NATO countries. And now NATO says, we want to go into Ukraine. This is the crux of the problem. And again, I ask this question, if you're Russia, what would you do? You're being encircled, surrounded, defeated, and your back is up the wall because you're afraid of the annexation of Ukraine into NATO, creating a military boundary right there on the Russian border. This is the problem in the Ukraine. It's not, and there's no solution to it that's easy, none. But this is the history of the Ukraine and how it's affect today. This is the Conservative Czar. See you next time.